Over the past couple of weeks, I have spent a lot of time scouring the internet for all kinds of bits of wisdom, words of advice for us as we sit in social isolation at home. I'm sure many of you have been doing the same as well, but I wanted to share with you two particular pieces that I thought were meaningful and relevant for this Passover holiday. So the first one comes from an article in Moment magazine. Moment magazine was a very well-known, popular Jewish journal that went digital a while ago, as many journals have. I think they're almost entirely on the internet now. And they interviewed Natan Sharansky. For those of you who don't know who Natan Sharansky is, he was one of the leaders of the Soviet Jewish dissident movement in the 1970s. That was a time when the Jews in the Soviet Union desperately wanted to escape, to leave, most of them to go to Israel, some to come to America. And as a reward for their efforts protesting against the Soviet government, they were frequently imprisoned. Natan Sharansky spent 9 years in a Soviet prison and a significant portion of that time in solitary confinement, where he famously played chess in order to keep himself sane. So this interview with Natan Sharansky in Moment, they're asking Natan Sharansky, what words of wisdom can he offer us with his terrible experience of being really in isolation, social isolation for such a long time. The second article is from one of my colleagues and friends, Rabbi Eric Gervis, who was a full-time pulpit rabbi in the Boston area and recently left that position in order to join the Musar Institute. So for those of you who don't know about Musar, it was a Jewish movement very popular in the 1800s that tried to develop personal character traits within us, that we should try and perfect our personality by focusing on certain character traits that make for an ideal, kind, compassionate human being, a person with a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives, who deals with the world in a truly honest and honorable way. But the Musar movement, although it was flourished in the 1800s, actually was based on texts of Jewish tradition which predated it by several hundred years. The Musar movement has become much more popular today in America recently, thanks to the work of Alan Marinis, who founded the Musar Institute and has translated many of those earlier texts into English, but more importantly, translated the ideas and concepts of Musar into an idiom that we can understand in the 21st century. And it's now he's built up a major institute where he's hired many teachers. One of them is my friend and colleague, Rabbi Eric Gervis. So those are the two sources I want to share with you. I'm going to start with Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky had three pieces of advice for us in how to cope with the world we live in today. Number one, remind yourself again and again and again why you're here. Why are you isolating yourself? That's number one. Number two, don't plan or pin your hopes on things beyond your control. You can't control everything, so don't craft your world around those things which you have no control over. And number three, laugh. So let's take a look at these three things. Remind yourself again and again why you're here. Sharansky says it's vital to tell yourself that you are in the midst of a very important struggle, and everything depends on your behavior. People should remind themselves how important these social restrictions are. This is a kind of war in which each of us is a soldier, he says. The results will depend on how we behave. In other words, you need to try and create a purpose and meaning for yourself for this social isolation. And one of the books that many people are reading right now is one of the fundamental texts about giving personal human meaning to your life, a book written by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was himself a psychiatrist who was imprisoned by the Nazis and somehow survived and wrote this book about his experience, about how he found meaning in that terrible situation. So tell yourself over and over again, what is your purpose? What is the meaning behind your social isolation? Number two, don't plan or pin your hopes on things beyond your control. Sharansky says that if you focus on events or developments you cannot influence, like when are we going to end this thing, When they don't come to pass, you will become disappointed and even depressed. Instead, he says, create your own world in which everything depends on you. For example, decide to learn a language or read a book you've always wanted to read. These are things which you can plan and then put yourself on a timetable to try and achieve them. Once you do, you'll feel yourself stronger and you'll feel yourself capable. And here's where I want to introduce the article that I read by my colleague and friend, Rabbi Eric Gervis. Here's what he wrote. I keep hearing folks talk about this new normal, and I find that I simply can't embrace that language. It's not that I am in denial, nor am I oblivious to our reality, my reality. I have found that I prefer to call this our now normal, and I pray with every fiber of my being that it is short-lived, at least as short-lived as possible. Even more so, I pray that the devastation, the losses we will number as we emerge from this collective nightmare will be as absolutely few as possible. I continue to hope and dream of the new normal that we will build together when this chapter gives way to what is next. And so in working at the Musar Institute and working on character development traits, these character traits are called midot in the Musar movement. And so this is what he writes. I find that my mind is flooded with midot, all clamoring for attention in my soul. Is that a part of what I am meant to learn from this time? Is this a new kind of laboratory time for soul work? It certainly can be if we but awaken to the possibilities. And so he lists some midot, kavod, honor. Who among us has not taken to seeing and honoring the people in our lives who in the time before this were present, but we somehow did not quite notice them in the same way that we do now? The cashiers who help us to check out at the grocery store, the stocking or the people who stock the shelves, the mail carrier or those who collect our trash. Suddenly, we have an opportunity to give honor to each of them, people we often look right past. Number 2, anava, humility, another character trait, humility. Who among us has not realized in this moment that for all we know and all we can control, we are individually and collectively largely at the mercy of something that no one can see? We need to have a little humility about what we can control and what we can't control, an opportunity to work on that midah. Number 3, savlanut, patience. And the word savlanut in Hebrew comes from sovel, which means to bear a burden or to suffer. And so some people see savlanut as patience, but patience in the sense of patiently bearing a burden. Many of us are now living in close quarters and with more members of our family back at home. We must relearn how to share time and space. Have a little savlanut, have some patience. Another midah, hakarat hatov, gratitude for the blessings around us. I can't remember the last time I ate 3 meals a day with my wife and our one son who is currently living with us, other than on a family vacation. Life has been so busy and everyone's schedule operates as if in a parallel universe, less so now. And there's a bit of a blessing to that. To be sure, he writes, other midot flow in and out of my mind and my heart and soul as I try to make sense of the life that I'm now living. So Eric Gervis suggests that we use this time to develop our midot. One of the ways that Sharansky would say is we're pinning our hopes on things that we have control over. We can work on our own personal characteristic traits. And by the way, Rabbi Strauss is running a Musar program here at Beth Yeshurun. We had Rabbi Wolbe do a Musar class on Sunday mornings until this came about. But there's a lot of material about the Musar movement online. You can look at the Musar Institute, go to the Musar Institute webpage. They have many writings about, from their teachers talking about our current situation. So the third thing Sharansky suggests is to laugh. You have to be able to laugh at everything which is happening to you, he writes. In Israel, for example, there are currently thousands and thousands of jokes and cartoons and people making light of their situation. This keeps everything in the right perspective. Sharansky says his other entertainment in prison was singing. I could never sing in my life because people hated when I sang, he said. So in my cell, I sang all the time in Hebrew. My prison guards thought I was crazy. He adds, I don't propose people torture their relatives by singing if they don't know how to sing. Think about what it is you enjoyed before, and now you have time to do it. So I also have been offering humorous opportunities. That's why I recently posted myself with a silly cat in a hat reading the Dr. Seuss version of the 4 questions for Passover, or wearing a fedora and sunglasses and doing the Passover rap, or posting other silly Passover things, not because I don't realize how serious the situation is, but precisely because I realize how serious it is, and I think we all need to be able to laugh despite what's going on. So those are Sharansky's 3 suggestions. Remind yourself again and again why you're isolating yourself. You are a soldier in an army fighting COVID. Number 2, don't pin your hopes on things that are beyond your control. Focus on things you have control over and work on those to create order in your life. And number 3, to laugh. So Eric Gervis ends his article with the following. We're living through a time of deep uncertainty. Nearly every bit of our routine and the seder of our lives has been disrupted, if not completely overturned. How we will emerge from this time, God willing, in good health, rests substantially in our hands. We may not be able to solve the medical, economic, or societal challenges single-handedly. Have a little humility. But we can do our small part by living our midot and preparing our hearts, our minds, and our souls for the new reality that we will build together. The first step is creating the seder, the order, that will allow us to flourish to the degree it is possible in this challenging time. And what better time to work on creating seder, order, than Passover, when we celebrate last night and tonight the Passover Seder, whose very word means order. It is the quintessential expression of the Jewish people's determination to impose order and meaning in our lives. Chag Sameach.